Hello again. I watched a television programme the other day about the murders of Jews at Babi Yar in Kiev during the Second World War. This prompted me to ask myself what it was about Ukraine that seemed to link the country to the Holocaust in various ways. I'm going to give two examples in this video, but there are others. This is really an exploratory thing just to get people's ideas on the subject. What is it that seems to link Ukraine to the Holocaust? I will pose a few questions here. I'm not making dogmatic statements, you understand, but asking real questions. In other words, I'm wondering if people can explain the thing to me. These days, the name of Auschwitz springs to mind as symbolising the Holocaust and attempted extermination of the Jews in Europe. It wasn't always so. In fact, this is a relatively recent phenomenon. In the late 1940s and 1950s, Belsen was far more well known in Britain, and it was the first name to come to mind when the subject of concentration camps was raised. This was perhaps because the British liberated Belsen, and it featured in newsreels seen at cinemas, on the Pathé News and so on, because it was the British that reached it first. In the 1960s, though, two other names became very well known in connection with the Holocaust and came to symbolise it: Babi Yar and Treblinka. Both of these places are connected with Ukraine, of course, of which more later. Several books brought these names to the public eye in Britain at that time, and I have a few of them here. I've had them for many years. In the early 60s, Yevtushenko's poem Babi Yar, it's found in this book, the collected poems of Yevtushenko. It was published in this country, and it came to be the sort of thing which all university students raved about. Everybody had a copy of Yevtushenko's selected poems, and they all knew Babi Yar. It was a bestseller. Over Babi Yar there were no memorials. I can still quote chunks of that poem to this day. This book, as I say, was a bestseller in the 1960s. Then a few years later, Kuznetsov's book Babi Yar was published in this country, and for a while he was as popular as Solzhenitsyn. This book was out of print for many years. It's just been published in a new edition, prompted by the war in Ukraine, of course. Treblinka became famous in the 1960s because of this book by Steiner. Most people had never heard of Treblinka before this book was published in 66. There are many criticisms of this book. It's often regarded as inaccurate. The same can't, of course, be said of Gita Sereni's Into That Darkness, which cemented in the public consciousness knowledge of the camp at Treblinka, which the Germans built in Poland. Here then are two questions. Well over 100,000 people, nearly all of them Jews, were murdered by shooting at Babi Yar. The gunfire could be heard across the whole city, and everybody in Kiev knew what was happening. Why were murders such as this carried out quite openly by the Einsatzgruppen in Ukraine, but not in Holland, France, Belgium, Denmark or Italy? In those countries, great efforts were made to disguise the process of murder, and people were told that Jews were being taken to resettlement camps. Nobody bothered with this fiction in Ukraine. The murders took place quite openly there. What was different about Kiev that such things were done there without any disguise, in a way that they were not in Amsterdam or Paris? The second question is this. I'm thinking now about Treblinka, where well over 1 million Jews were murdered. Whenever we think about these extermination camps in Poland, We always have some vague idea at the back of our mind that they were administered and guarded by German soldiers and SS. This wasn't true. At Treblinka, 85% of the guards and troops were Ukrainian, and only 1/6 were German. Why should this be so? Why were only Ukrainians selected for this task? Why not 85% Dutch guards and troops, or 85% Danish or French? This then is the second question. How come 80 to 85% of the guards and troops at Treblinka were Ukrainian and that no other nationality was involved, other than a small number of Germans, making up just 1 in 6 of the staff at the death camp? I'm honestly interested in this matter and curious to know what people think might be the explanation for what was seen at Babi Yar and Treblinka.